Hello, welcome back. We are talking about scatter plots with a focus on clusters and outliers. When we're interpreting clusters and outliers, we need to understand what they are. A cluster is a set of closely grouped data. Data may cluster around a point or along a line, and an outlier is a data point that is very different from the rest of the data in the set. So it sets out apart from the others. A scientist gathers information about eruptions of Old Faithful, a geyser in Yellowstone National Park. She uses the data to create a scatter plot. The data show the length of time between eruptions, that's called the interval, and how long the eruption lasts, that's called duration. And so she created this scatter plot, and you'll notice that we have a tight group. They're so tight that's kind of hard to see some of the points. They're so close to each other. And then here we have another larger group. It's still clustered, but it's a little looser than what this one is. And then I see this point right here in the middle. And so when I'm looking at these groupings, I have two clusters, okay? I have one tight cluster and one a little looser. So, the lower cluster is tight. And the upper cluster is more loose. Okay, what do they tell you about the eruptions from Old Faithful? And so what happens is the duration. So if it's between the intervals are between 40 and 60 minutes. The durations are much shorter. And then if the interval is between 75 and, 100 minutes, then they last longer. The intervals or the duration is longer. Okay? So the shorter the interval, the shorter the duration. Okay? Do we see any outliers in this scatter plot? Is there a point that doesn't seem to be a part of the group? And if you said yes, this one right here, I would agree. I believe that it is the outlier because it's not part of either group. It's kind of suspended between the two. Okay. Okay, let's see. When we're identifying outliers and clustering in scatter plots, the first thing we want to do is to determine if there are data points in the scatter plot that follow a general pattern. Any of the points that follow this same general pattern are part of a cluster. The second thing we do is determine if there are data points in the scatter plot that are far from the general pattern, and these are called the outliers. So a scatter plot, remember, is a graph displaying data points relating to variables. Each piece of data has its own point on the scatter plot, and the points are not connected, so there's no lines drawn between the points. A cluster is a group of points that follow the same general pattern. They could follow a linear pattern or a curved pattern, and the clusters contain many points. So it's kind of like you think of a cluster of grapes. They don't grow just one grape on one little stem. They actually have groups of little short stems that each have a grape on it. And so think of it as a group of or a cluster of grapes. An outlier is a data point that does not fit the rest of the data. It lies outside of a cluster and does not follow the same pattern. Scatter plots can have many outliers, just one outlier, or even no outliers. And we were going to use these steps and definitions to identify outliers and clustering in scatter plots in the following 2 examples. So let's take a look at these. All right, so here's our first example. Do you see a cluster? And if you're saying, yes, I see a cluster, it's a large, loose, almost linear type of cluster, then there's our cluster. And then do we have any outliers? Well, I actually see 2. I see one here and one way over here. They are definitely apart from the rest. Okay. All right, let's take a look at the next one. Oh, I circled these. So the red is talking about the cluster. It's I don't know. It's a loose fit that's almost linear because it looks like a nice oval. And then those are our 2 outliers. Take a look at this one. What do you see? Okay, so if you said you see 2 clusters and an outlier, I agree. So this is our outlier here. And this is a group or a cluster. And this is a group that's a cluster. And if we had to describe the difference in these, the one that is higher on the independent or on the dependent side are a little looser than these over here that are closer to the high on the independent. And so these are a little tighter grouped together than what these are. So this is a little tight one. This is a loose one. And you'll notice that the clusters are spread quite a bit apart. It's like they have 2 separate entities. All right, let's look at this one. It says the table shows the number of people in the total cost of their movie tickets at various movie theaters. And they took this data and they plotted these points. Complete the scatter plot to represent, so they've done that. And it says identify any outliers in the scatter plot. What situation might have caused an outlier? So do you see an outlier in this scatter plot? Okay, if you said yes at 5:37, looks like, that is my outlier. Okay, what do you think may have caused that? So the number of people and the total costs. Okay, so this might have been a special, or maybe this is the late night Saturday one where it's a little more expensive to go to, and these may have been the matinees. I know that you can get into the movies at a matinee with a cheaper price, so that's probably why this was at full price. Okay, suppose, let's see, that was one we already did. Let's talk about these clusters. What do you see? Okay, if you said 2 clusters, you're correct. I have a cluster here, and I have a cluster here. They're fairly spread apart. These are a little tighter, these are a little looser. Let's talk about which plots shown might describe the group of adult Lamprologus calipteris. That's a type of fish. They're bigger than their female counterparts, and they weigh about 13 times as much. Also, white females reach a length of 6 centimeters, and males reach a length of 15 centimeters. All right, so which of the plots may describe them? All right, so if I take a look, there's either the females weigh 13 times, no, the males are 13 times bigger than the female. So they weigh more, so that would be a high. And they're also bigger. This is showing them as shorter, so that's not going to work. So what about this one? We have the weight is high and the length is high, and then the females, short length, short weight. I think that probably looks, because 13 times as much, you'd expect to be a large gap. I think it's C. I know we haven't finished looking at them, but I think that one really represents it. The only other one that's very similar would be D, but they have this group in the middle. And what do you think might explain this group in the middle? Okay, so maybe these are younger males. That would be the only case I could think here is that they're not fully grown. They are heavier, but they're not as long as the adult males. Okay, I think we're done for today. So if you would like to have time to talk with your teacher about any questions you may have, now would probably be a good time. Thank you.